Welcome to the NLP View with your host, Donna Blinston. Each week, Donna will explore how the techniques of NLP can help improve your personal and professional life. And now, here's your host, Donna Blinston.
Hello and welcome to the NLP View. My name is Donna Blinston. Today's guest is the inspiring Rosie O'Hara, author of the best-selling book, No More Bingo Dresses. Neuro-Linguistic Programming, NLP, is an approach to communication, personal development and psychotherapy. The title refers to a stated connection between the brain and the nervous system, hence the neuro, our language, linguistics, and the behavioural patterns that have been learned through our experiences, which is the programming. NLP is capable of providing people with resources that they need to cope with everyday circumstances, like cancer. No More Bingo Dresses is Rosie's personal journey about her experience with breast cancer. Her account of this part of her life's journey is frank and honest, which is so refreshing. It's so refreshingly different from other related personal journals. Instead of the self-pity and sorrow that perhaps you could expect from a book that relates to cancer, instead, the book that Rosie has so elegantly written, it's inspiring, it's empowering and uplifting. It uses NLP techniques and shows the reader how they can cope with breast cancer and other people. So I'd like to welcome to the show Rosie O'Hara. Hello, Rosie.
Hi, Donna.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Yes, despite the fact it's midnight here in the UK, yes.
Yeah, here. An excuse to lie in tomorrow, I think.
Absolutely. Good job it's Sunday.
Exactly. Well, it's great to have you on the show today. A real pleasure. I want to thank you, really, that's my first thing, for sharing such a personal part of your life and writing this book.
I'm not sure that I can say that it's a pleasure because I actually read through it on Thursday together with somebody. We recorded it, but it fulfilled the aim that I had, which was to share with people that you can use NLP, and maybe you'll ask me some questions about that later. to prove that it doesn't have to be doom and gloom, because I was very annoyed at the time. So there are some very funny bits in the book, as you'll know if you've read it. So, I have. I've read it.
I've read it. It completely encapsulated me, to be honest. Once I started reading, and the way you've laid it out as a day-to-day diary, I wanted to read the next day and find out what happened at the next appointment, and the different things that you're saying you're going to do, and how you say, I'll discuss this later. I wanted to get to that point where you discussed it later.
Oh,
so
right.
It was bringing me to want to read it more and more.
Well, it was a diary. I mean, it was actually a diary when it started out. That was how it began. It was a diary to various friends around Europe and in the UK as well. And that was, I'll come back later, certain things where it's time for me to go to bed and I'll come back to this later.
Yes, yeah. So I guess before we start, could you tell our audience about yourself?
Yeah, I live in the far north of Scotland. I'm not from Scotland, if you can tell by the accent. Originally, I'm an engineer, actually, and also a translator and interpreter of German, which is how I came to NLP. But I'm also a mum and a granny, and I have my own NLP training company, NLP Thailand, and I train other people to use NLP, our certificate practitioners and master practitioners. So another decision behind the book, or behind my approach to cancer, was if the trainer can't do it, then I can't go around training people and helping them to use NLP. So it was kind of a walk-talk thing. But I came to NLP when I was asked to teach German to engineers, and I'd never taught before. And I did a lot of reading and research, came across something called accelerated learning repeatedly, and in 1994 actually came across, I was in the northeast of England, and discovered that somebody trained NLP locally, and I went along, and at that time I used it a lot, although I intended to use it with children and adults in the teaching and learning of German. I also, the first thing I learned was to use it on me, and that's what I did primarily for quite a while until I did my practitioner and master practitioner, and then subsequently my NLP trainer. So that's maybe answered all the questions you perhaps going to ask me.
It certainly answered the first few, yes. It does. Well, I think I personally found, once I'd found NLP in the first place, I had a hunger and I wanted to learn more. And I guess it was, I half wanted to learn more about myself, and as well as that, how I could use it. And the more you look into it and the more you do, the more you realise that it's so adaptable and applicable to almost every context that I can possibly imagine. It's so flexible, and it is around the linguistics, the language, and being aware of yourself, I think, as a first stance off, and how things can impact upon you. And that's one of the things that really brought home for me with your book. As a nurse myself, I work with a lot of patients that have got cancer, going through cancer, or have come out the other side. Mm-hmm. And even though I purposefully am very aware of the language that I use, so that I don't have any, cause any negative installations to them, I'm still aware of perhaps behaviours that you do automatically, or the systems and the policies and the loops that we've got to go through within healthcare that could put the patient themselves into a situation that they could perceive it negatively.
Yeah, I think the medical profession and my experience is of the NHS in the UK, but also of Germany in some respects, although some things are slightly different there. The medical profession is very problem-oriented. It's more about there's a problem, and it tends to keep people in the problem state instead of enabling people to maybe ask or seek an alternative. But for me, it was more about improvement, and improvements kind of weren't allowed. You're supposed to stay where you are. The language keeps you as a patient where you are, I think, is one of the things. And I don't. Sometimes I think some of the negative stuff is okay. People tell me that I'm very positive, but for me, a lot of it was about problems I wanted to avoid rather than maybe the problem or the process orientation. The medical profession thinks it has to be done this way, and we've always done it like this, so we'll always carry on doing it like this.
Yeah.
And as a patient, I was saying, no, excuse me, I want to do this differently. I want to avoid having medication. I mean, I've had no medication. It's 3 years ago since I opted for a mastectomy, and I opted for that because I decided that would keep my surgeon off my back, literally, and I refused radiotherapy, any medication, because I believed, and I'm still here now, 3.5 years down the line, and I'm fine. I believed that by using the power of language and the power of the mind and the body, that I could stay well, basically. The tumour was a little bit annoying in many ways because it wasn't planned.
No.
It was very annoying, and I wanted it to disrupt my life and that of other people as well around me as little as possible. But other people's reactions were interesting. So the book's not just about using NLP with cancer. I think for me, more important is with other people and understanding other people as a patient. Yeah. And so it's a plea to other people. Read the damn book and find out how you can say things more usefully to your nearest and dearest, to whoever it is, to actually find out what it is that they want instead of, again, putting people in, you must do it this way, because we've always done it this way.
Yes, yeah. And we do, it's almost like a default setting, isn't it? And if it's something that you know and that you're used to, you automatically suggest it without thinking, is that right for the person? And it's not that you don't think, is that right for the person? It's just because it's the norm and the right thing in your model of the world, you presume that it's going to be right for that other person, which, as you've pointed out, it's not always, and in fact, it's often the opposite.
Yeah, well, very, very often, and I came across that quite often, and probably still will do. I have a yearly appointment to go and see my surgeon, which is actually going to be this coming Friday, and he's learned not to send anybody else in to see me because I'll always have questions. He made that mistake once, and anyway, and he's now quite happy to answer my questions as well. But his assumption is that patient is there, or the breast, or the tumour, as they tend to refer to people I discovered, or the person in bed, whatever. The mastectomy, that there's no human being there, which for some ways I suppose that's how they keep themselves out of the emotional aspect. But they then tend to treat the patient as the patient is not a person. They forget the patient has feelings, has needs and wants. And certainly I think my short time in hospital was an indication for the particular hospital I was in. They probably couldn't wait to get rid of me, but I'm sure they missed me because I asked questions and I used painkillers and and various other things, and people as patients believe that they have to follow what the doctor says, what the nurse says, whereas, as you said, that they're doing this because it's a pattern that they follow, and they don't stop to think, oh, perhaps so-and-so doesn't want this, perhaps so-and-so would like something different. That would ultimately save us a lot of time and money, really. And
it would, and it's often the busyness, because there's especially in the beginning when you come into hospital for on the operation day, it's very much there's a selection of things that need to be done for your admission, your baseline obs, your pre-op assessments, all the paperwork, and it's very much all busy, and you go through as quickly as you can. And if you're short-staffed on top of that, that adds to it, taking even more time away from that nurse-patient relationship.
Yeah, I'm sure.
That's one thing that your book. I'd recommend it to any nurse, NLP practitioner, especially from the NLP side, because you've explained your experience and then what you could do using the NLP techniques to change it. Like when you talked about rapport, and I think as nurses on the whole, we spend a lot of time focusing on how to build rapport, and some nurses do it exquisitely, very, very easy, and it's very, very natural to them. Others, it's a little bit a little bit harder. So the tools and the techniques that you explain in your book would enable them to make it a lot more seamless, and it wouldn't be that forcedness that is present sometimes.
Yeah, I think so, and that's why you've read the books, so you know that it's a diary. So the chapters don't have a certain length. So it depends on what I actually wrote that day, and it's not every day. And then in between, I put the relevant NLP bits that belong to that particular section. So the rapport, when the particular nurse leant right into my personal space and told me, but we know it's not a cyst. We know it's that. We know it's a little breast cancer, and she kind of didn't leave me any breathing space or anything else. Certainly, the nurses on the ward were very different, but also, as you say, very busy, but happy, I think, as well, to have a bit of light relief themselves, because they go about doing their job and they believe that they believe that they're doing the right thing, which they are in certain ways, but they would make their lives much easier if they took a little bit of time out to notice what's happening and to ask useful questions, what I would call clean questions about what the person wants, which are in the book. and explaining things to people in a better way.
Could you explain a bit more for our audience about the clean questions? Because this is one area that I found particularly beneficial.
I'll go from, I tend to mix two aspects, well, one aspect of NLP, and then I add something to it, which is the clean bit, which is, according to some people, technically not NLP, but it's all part of, NLP has something called the meta model, which was based on, depends on whose version of it you read, but based on 9 or 14 linguistic distinctions, whereby we delete, we distort and we generalize information. And one of the biggest things I think within the NHS is probably, or any medical, because we're a wider audience, so any medical profession, is that they know what they mean, and I as the patient know what I mean, and we fail to explain ourselves. So we use words like the treatment, the whatever that's going to happen, and we don't actually explain how we are going to treat the person, or how we would like to be treated. So there are some very neat questions, some very simple questions, which is repeating back to the treatment. Tell me about the treatment, without any kind of judgment in it, without putting words like you, what's it about, without getting angry, just by repeating the person's words back to them and asking them, tell me about that. Is there anything else about that? What else? Those are bits of clean questions. But there is a whole chapter which is called Words and Wheelbarrows, which is in the book, which explains how we can say things more usefully and also ask questions more usefully. Because these are the things that we get angry about as well. And I think the example I use in the book is, well, I know it is because I use it on my courses, is the word relationship. So somebody will say there's something wrong with my relationship. And we all make a decision as to what that is because we only know in NLP terms about our map or model of the world. And it turns out it's not actually a relationship with the significant other at home. It's maybe a relationship with a work colleague, but or a relationship to some form of medication as well. So it's useful to ask careful questions around that rather than going from where we currently are. So the last thing that happened to us is probably the frame we put on somebody else's conversation, and that must happen in hospital because you've got so many patients to see. So if the last person was annoying, then maybe doctors, nurses still carry bits of that with them instead of stopping for a moment and asking a useful question about and of this person who's in front of them. Just to see that everybody wants the same treatment.
It is, and it must happen. It does happen. And I think as well because we're explaining similar things repetitively, because you've explained it already maybe 10, 15 minutes ago, you forget what you haven't explained to the next person.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And it's that whole thing around because as a nurse, it's the norm and it's obvious to you because you know it. You don't realise that the bits of information that people need to know. So that's one area that within your book, because you promote the individual as the patient to ask those questions, it enables them to feel more comfortable in asking them, but also enables the nurse to be able to step back and think, okay, I need to go through this in more detail. And it's those bits that it's just that breakdown in communication that's, as you say, it's where you've deleted, distorted and generalised terms that are used.
Yeah, I think also there's another aspect because I'm also a lab profile trainer, a language and behaviour profile, which is part of NLP, the NLP meta programs, but on steroids. And one of the important things is that question. You may say in your head, how many times do I have to explain it to that person? But actually, you may have to explain it at least 3, if not 5 times, and some people you need to explain the same thing to all the time because it's just not going in. the aspect of, as I mentioned earlier, briefly, do people want to do they want to achieve something? Is it something kind of they're working towards, or is it about problems they're avoiding? And that's how you motivate the patient. Certainly, I know it works because I listen out to the patterns of the doctors and various other people, and that gets me a stress-free relationship with them. Because I'm noticing where they're coming from. Now, not every patient has got that. Certainly, most patients haven't. But I think it's also important in terms of if you have a friend or relative who has some form of cancer, you really have to start asking them what do they want and listening out for their language patterns. And then one of the big things for me that I completely banned was any words like struggle, battle, whatever all those words are around cancer, because I hate struggles and I hate battles and I hate mountains, and I'd like to walk around the side of them. I'd even go a longer way, or I'll make a tunnel through it. So it's really important to listen out. I cut people out of my life at the time because they would only talk about, oh, it's a battle, it's a problem. I know other people who...
It's going to be hard.
Yeah. That turns me off straight away. That reminds me of so many things. And I was able to switch that off, and eventually I now just delete that because that's that person's model. It's not my model. And one of my associates at the time said to me the difference between me and other people was that every time he spoke to me or he saw me or I emailed him, I would tell him about the tiniest improvements that were happening, that things were getting better. And he said he believed that that's also what aided me to get well much sooner than anybody else he'd ever met in his life. And he's older than me, so he would know. And yeah, that's I look for the tiny steps, the little things that are happening.
There might be little things, but the significant things that are happening, because it just shows you. It shows you. I think just the sheer fact that you acknowledge them, because once you acknowledge them, you're also acknowledging how well your body's coping, how well it's healing and dealing with it, and it definitely helps the healing process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. You both have a lot to say. I think, yeah, and also that, and one of the things that for me was important was taking time out for me each day and lying down and thinking about some of these pink and fluffy bits of NLP, but the ones that are important. So healing light, and also visualizing that I was going to get better, that everything was going to heal up, and that everything would be fine. Which enables...
It was that and your compelling purpose.
Yes, my compelling purpose, my plan.
That, in fact, you've wrote in the book a possible way to plan, which I thought was brilliant, and I would love that to be part of the admission pack for people when they send out information for patients before they're coming in. If that was with them, it would make such a difference to people's hospital experience, their understanding, how they're prepared for the procedure, because there's a lot of questions that you don't think to ask until afterwards, when you regret that you didn't ask it, or if I'd have known that was happening, I wouldn't have reacted in such a way. And it's the questions that you put down in your book just give people the permission to ask them and the permission to think about them, I think.
Yeah, and I wrote those with hindsight as well in some ways, and because I suppose I was in some kind of panic. We have a 28-day turnaround up here from diagnosis to getting you into the operation, and I had many other things to plan, such as planning my business and various other things, and read the book. But my first problem was my husband, because of previous experience that he had, which we got over. I think also it's knowing what you're going to do when you come home, which I did in certain aspects, because many years ago, I've been in hospital for something completely different. But so many people don't. It could be the first time they go into hospital. And there are all those questions to ask, particularly if you have an operation that is physically very debilitating for much longer than I was happy with in some ways. But to plan for that and to plan for the fact that there are things you won't be able to do, and also the big aspect is around where's the money going to come from afterwards as well. You know, what's going to happen with your finances and all those different things, and getting other people to support you. I think plans, compelling purposes are really important. I've just been doing some this week with a group of primary school children between the ages of 5 and 11, because we don't plan for the future in anything, kind of in that aspect, which is different. We stick kids in school and some of them aren't quite sure what they're doing there. And I think that's the same with hospital. You know you've got to have an operation, but you don't really know why. You don't know the ins and outs. You don't know what might happen. Somebody gives you a leaflet, but the leaflet doesn't tell you anything. But yeah, great. We'll lobby somebody for that then, that we get this compelling purpose within every pack for going into hospital. That would be, and that would help also all the medical professionals to make the patient's life easier and make their own.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Reading it as a nurse, I was like, oh, you know, it was heaven in a piece of paper, because it gave us almost a list of things that this, you know, how I can support my patient even better, which is every nurse's wish. And I know as a coach, the people that I work with, you know, out of hospital, they have problems with. They hadn't planned, you know, at the time. They get the bad news of having the cancer, and everything else just stops.
Yes.
Having that compelling purpose, looking into the future, how they're going to deal with it, what they're going to do, enables them to one, to focus on it, two, to not focus on the immediate going into hospital, but also it prepares them for that homeward journey, for getting back onto the feet and what to expect, because you expect to be sore, you expect this, that and the other, but you don't expect everything.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Or where to go for help.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That's one of the things that I say in the book, and that nobody had actually really explained that to me, and some of it I do sometimes wonder if medical professionals think because you're marginally intelligent and you can ask questions about certain things that you know the answers to everything, and you don't, because with cancer it's the big C, as one of my friends said, and for so many people it's as if a kind of a drawbridge drops down or goes up in front of you, and you can't see anything apart from what's going to happen. And for many people, cancer is it's the end, which is one of the things that I had to contend with on the first day when I got a diagnosis. But read the book to find out about that. And
definitely read the book. And Rosie, I'm aware. Well, we're nearly over. I can't believe that half an hour has flown by so quickly. Just before we go, firstly, could you quickly explain why you've called the book "No More Bingo Dresses" for our audience?
Yeah. I used to live in the northeast of England, I mentioned that, and in the northeast of England, a low-cut top is called your bingo dress, and it came up in conversation with a friend, and I told her the only thing is we're having a mastectomy, because I didn't have a reconstruction. It was, you can't look down my top anymore, so I have to wear high neck tops.
Thank you. And Rosie, can you tell our audience where they can buy your book, how they can get in contact with you, and all your information that you want to share?
You can buy the book either from Amazon. You can there are 10 signed copies, personally signed copies available from www.nlphighland.co.uk, which is also where you'll find me as well, and information on the book if you go down the left-hand side. So nlphighland.co.uk, key in that and you'll find me, you'll find all the contact details.
That's brilliant. And thank you once again, Rosie. I'd love to keep on talking to you, but unfortunately we're out of time. So again, thank you for joining us today on the show. Your book is an inspiration, and just all I can say, audience, is read it. And thank you for joining the NLP View. If you'd like to learn more about NLP, then tune in each week and also visit my website, www.donnablinston.com, where you can pick up a copy of my best-selling book, Psychobabble, a straightforward, plain English guide to the benefits of NLP. Also visit theorganicview.com and sign up for our newsletter, which will keep you updated with the upcoming shows, guests and online workshop. Bye bye.